This is a free preview of the full hour-long masterclass available exclusively on the Physiotutors app. Check the link in the description.
My name is Enda King. I'm Head of Elite Performance and Development in Aspetar in Qatar, and I'm very fortunate to be a collaborator with Physiotutors, and I'm delighted to be presenting today on primary, secondary and tertiary groin injury prevention with I suppose the goal of trying to provide some ideas about what to do before symptoms develop, when they do, and when you've resolved that groin injury, some of the areas for focus on groin prevention. All injury prevention is an important part when you're looking after athletes, either in a team environment or afterwards in a clinic environment. So I want to share some of the expertise and research that I've been involved in along with colleagues over the last while to give you some thoughts that you can try and incorporate into your practice after watching this presentation. So I'm currently based in Doha in Qatar. This is the Aspire Zone campus, and the building you see in front of you is Aspetar, an Orthopedic and Sports Medicine Centre. And within the rehabilitation department, we've over 100 practitioners across various disciplines: physiotherapists, strength and conditioning coaches, biomechanics, and other specialist sub-practitioners as well. And we spend a lot of time, and my role as Head of Elite Performance and Development, reviewing what we do. You tend to in Aspetar get a lot more of injured athletes, so those presenting with symptoms. So your secondary and tertiary prevention are obviously very, very important. But we collaborate with our colleagues in the National Sports Medicine Programme about ways of trying to reduce and minimise primary onset as well. Much of my experience and perceived knowledge in groin has come from working with my colleagues in Aspetar, but also previously where I used to work in the sports surgery clinic in Dublin. And some of the research that I would be alluding to would be from that time there, and be important to recognise the contribution and expertise of all these practitioners as well. So when it comes to prevention or to rehabilitation, there's three core principles we lean a lot on in Aspetar. Number one is to begin with the end in mind. So to think about what is the source of the problem, why have we ended up where we are, and that'll assist not only our rehabilitation outcomes, but also our prevention outcomes as well. Number two is that you see what you look for and you look for what you know. If, for example, all of your hamstring prevention is hamstring strengthening, that's a very important aspect of it. But if an athlete has good hamstring strength, what are the other factors that may be relevant to it? And so the same goes for both acute and chronic groin injury as well. And the breadth of our assessment is important for identifying those outlier cases and contributors to either recurrent or ongoing groin issues. And number three then is, did you do what you said you were going to do? Have we picked the right exercise, the right intervention? Have we coached them the right way? Have we periodized them appropriately over time to get the change that we're looking for? In a team environment, we can do lots of stuff, lots of prevention work, but actually, is it individualized to that athlete's needs, and is it effective in terms of what they're getting from it? So that theme will hopefully come out throughout this presentation. Are guys and girls who have developed symptoms and you're looking to try and get on top of it and prevent it becoming a worse problem than it is already. And again, it can be quite challenging for us in this regard because many athletes will continue to play even after they've had an onset of symptoms. It's not bad enough, as they would say, to stop them from playing. And it can be very difficult to get clarity on diagnosis, as there's lots of different structures in the same area that can produce symptoms. It can be difficult to get a clear picture from radiology because if you MRI lots of asymptomatic groins, you're going to see lots of so-called pathology that's not relevant to their asymptomatic presentation. And so when there's a lack of clarity on diagnosis and a lack of clarity on pathology, management strategies can become varied, and therefore you start to get inconsistent outcomes and a high recurrence. And so it can be a challenge for us to know what to do. So the first thing to do is recognize them early and recognize what the pain source is, and then try and clinically reason, is this a case that would manage well with load management and rehab, or do they need something else? So far and away, the most effective tests are the long lever squeeze tests. Again, Christian has done some excellent work on this, validating against the Hagos hip and groin score. And what you'll often find is that in that long lever position, athletes start to describe some symptoms even before they report symptoms developing during playing or during training as well. So It's, apart from asking the athlete, do they have any symptoms, that long lever squeeze is a really effective way at loading that region to try and bring on any early onset. We obviously then want to make sure that we have an accurate diagnosis as quickly as possible, but that can be quite tricky because even though all our anatomy pictures have these lovely origins and insertions, the reality is that the anatomy in the area is much more complex, and that when an athlete is presenting with symptoms, very often, whether it's coming from the adductor or the inguinal region or the iliopsoas region, they'll point at the same area regardless. So it's very difficult when they tell us, and as we said, radiology can be quite tricky to try and identify where those symptoms are coming from. And our pain provocation tests are often very sensitive, but they're not very specific. So a former colleague of mine, Enda Falvey, looked at injury of the pubic aponeurosis of the adductor longus and found that these squeeze tests, both at 90 degrees hip flexion, 45 and 0, they were quite sensitive but not specific. So if you had no pain on them, there was a good chance you didn't have any injury to your rectus abdominis or adductor longus or the pubic aponeurosis. But if you did have pain on a squeeze test, you're not very sure where those symptoms are coming from. And so the Doha consensus tried to offer some consistency and clarity on that by having just 4 entities that we could use to describe these symptoms. The challenge for us is twofold. Number one is that getting us to agree as clinicians and practitioners on where the pain is coming from is quite difficult. We're quite have a good level of agreement when it's a hip-related issue, but when it's other issues, such as inguinal, adductor, iliopsoas or pubic, we generally have low levels of agreement, or certainly moderate levels of agreement across us all. So you have all of these various diagnoses pointing at each other and not really sure what to do. But from our point of view, from a secondary prevention point of view, it's very important that I get a clear anatomical diagnosis as best I can. But what's more important is probably to be able to clinically reason or get consistency between us. Is this something that's for rehabilitation, or is it something that requires a different intervention medically or otherwise? And once I've decided that, if I decide it is for rehabilitation, then ultimately trying to understand the biomechanical diagnosis or why that area has become overloaded acutely or chronically in the first place is the next most important thing for secondary prevention. So yes, our number one is to be sure where the pain is coming from and to recognize early. But the second point in secondary prevention is to try and stop it becoming a time loss injury. You'll see that whether it's primary, secondary or tertiary, we have the same 3 corners of the triangle that we need to consider at any given point in time. And so first comes back to your tissue capacity, in that when you're returning an athlete back, are you making up your criteria as you go along, or have you defined return to play transition KPI and criteria that you're going to follow through? So in that chronic groin presentation that we talked about a little bit, our paper we talked about a little bit earlier on, we only returned to running when they had a pain-free crossover test. So when resisted hip flexion in a Thomas test position brought on pain or symptoms on the contralateral side. We only returned to change direction when they had regained symmetrical and appropriate hip rotation, and we talked about how that's reflective of motor control in the area, and when their squeeze at 45 degrees of hip flexion was pain-free. And they only went back to training when they had symmetrical and efficient multidirectional mechanics, and we'll talk about why that's important in a second, and pain-free squeeze at 0, 45 and at 90. So they were completely asymptomatic at all points. So it's really important that, as we said, we are able to define your criteria, but also once they've achieved those criteria, are we targeting those pathomechanics throughout rehabilitation, but also after they return to the field of play? And so 2 areas that we may potentially focus on are in terms of running mechanics and kicking mechanics. But I'm going to bring that back a step to hopping and the stability on one leg. And so this was work that was done by a colleague of ours, Shane Gore, looking at the ability to hurdle hop. And what he found was that those with groin pain had more pelvic drop and less ankle stiffness or poor ankle stiffness compared to healthy athletes that never had groin pain. And what he found was that after rehabilitation, that pelvic drop resolved, but the ankle stiffness deficits would often remain. And so it's important that we're addressing those throughout rehabilitation. So 2 videos I want to focus on here is the importance of stance and swing leg mechanics. So if we have a look at our first athlete here, and we look at him in mid stance on the right hand side, we'll see, apologies now, we will see that a relatively neutral trunk, a relatively neutral pelvis, hip adduction and foot position. So that's stance on the right-hand side. If we come back and look at stance on the contralateral or left-hand side, can we see the trunk side flexion, the pelvic drop, despite a relatively neutral foot position? So I can look at the strength of the muscles around the hip, but very often you'll find that my strength is poorly related to the positions I take into or the way that I coordinate movement. So we can see some stance leg deficits. Similarly, we look at the athlete beside him, and if we have a look here at the influence of stance mechanics on swing mechanics. So if you go on mid stance on the left, we'd say a relatively neutral trunk position, pelvis, hip adduction, foot position, and compare that to the contralateral side, where you can see the foot externally rotated, the hip adduction, pelvic drop, and trunk side flexion in comparison to the opposite side.